Hello, and welcome to Encouraging Leadership, conversations that mobilize today's women leaders, with your host, Ann Miner. Meet leaders who share their observations, knowledge, insight, and perspectives to mobilize you to apply your own leadership in business and in life. Here's your host, Ann Miner.
Today I have with me Sue Maes. Sue has 30 years' experience in the healing field, both as a life coach and an international teacher. She has dedicated her life to helping others achieve their full potential on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels. Along with being a medical intuitive, Sue has just received her master's in metaphysical science. Sue, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ann.
Well, it's a great pleasure to have you with us today, and I would just love to hear how you became a spiritual healer, how you got to the place you are today, and, my goodness, how did you manage to achieve a master's in metaphysical science?
Well, I began this journey when I was a young woman, and I was looking for something that excited me to my core. And I found the work that I do purely by coincidence, but I now don't believe in coincidences. I think I was divinely guided. I was looking for something that I could help people to become more of who their authentic self was inside. And I first found a course of working with people with educational kinesiology, and the part that I first focused on was brain gym and how to turn the two hemispheres of your brain on so that you started to walk your talk in an integrated fashion. And that totally excited me because that work originally was only for children and people with learning disabilities. And since I have a stepdaughter with learning disabilities, it excited me to think that I could help her to become more of who she really was in an integrated fashion, and that her life could be more than they were projecting for her. From those courses, it excited me to learn. I kept learning and studying applied kinesiology, specialized kinesiology. I became a professional kinesiology provider, and courses like Touch for Health, Total Body Modification. I studied environmental stress. I studied holistic nutrition and became a medical intuitive. There's just so many courses that I just kept taking courses until I felt that I was at least a little bit full or a little bit integrated enough that I could actually give back to society what I had learned, and how to put it together into programs was the main thing that I was most excited about, because in the field it was very difficult to find people that were actually taking the information and having a private practice. So when I first started in the early 80s, there was only about 5 of us in Ontario doing this kind of practice. And now there's only about 5 of us doing this in Ontario still. But what excited me was that it balanced all the information that I learned was about balancing the physical body and making the physical body able to take in the energy and be able to be manifest out in a much more balanced state. And then a lot of the work included emotional work. So when you look at who we are as a whole, we have that physical body that we all are so concerned about, because we live in it. But we also have that emotional body that stands in front of it. And the emotional body is where, you have all your feelings, whether they be good or bad or mediocre. They are just feelings. And then moving into the mental body, where you do all your processing of thoughts and beliefs and rules and regulations and boundaries and no boundaries. And that pushed me again to learn about the spiritual part, really integrate the spiritual part into my practice, because, when I started in the early 80s, no one was coming in and saying, do you do Reiki or do you know any energy work? It was just all part of what we did. Right? We did hands-on healing before it was ever called Reiki or anything. We learned about, I was a shiatsu therapist first, and so I learned about the energy flow within the body. And so putting it all together, the very, I would say, pinnacle was the metaphysical science, where I learned more about how to pull all that spiritual energy that we're always drawing in through our crown chakra into our bodies all the way through, so that we could be in a balanced state. And metaphysical science is the study of investigating inner consciousness from a holistic perspective. So it just kind of tied into everything that I had learned.
Right. So oh my goodness, you have really made a thorough investigation of all the factors that go into making a person whole.
Yes. If you're not doing it from that whole perspective, you come out and have blank spaces in your learning, or blank spaces in your perceptions. And that can cause you to go into fight or flight. That can cause you to stop or not make good judgments. And that's what you want to change, because your human potential is unlimited.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of people, and maybe that's not really the question we want, is, but how would you describe the people that are attracted to you as clients?
Well, a lot of the people that come to me are experiencing stress, or they're having learning difficulties, or they're being challenged with personal growth. And it could be in their changing moments of their life when they want more clarity and more decisive information to allow them to follow through and fulfill their desires. Or people that really know where their blockages are, and they haven't found a solid technique or a solid training that allows them to change it permanently. And the thing I love about this work the most is you don't have to relive any pain. So you don't have to sit and do chat therapy with me. That's not the answer, because every cell of your being has already lived that pain. If you've had pain, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual pain, and you can do a bypass. I'm from the generation of records, so I always tell people it's kind of like when our record used to get stuck on a spot and you'd have to go walk, get up, pick up the needle, and put it back down in another spot. That's what the kinesiology and the work that I do can do. It can just pick that up and move it for you, so that you're not going back to that same spot over and over and over again and not having to relive pain.
Mm-hmm. So how do you see being able to apply this in a leadership capacity?
Well, in a leadership capacity, I believe that every leader should be able to teach to all the parts, whether you're a kinesthetic learner, whether you're a visual learner, an auditory learner. It doesn't matter which kind of learner you are. As a leader, you have to be able to give the information back to them in all those ways. You also have to be able to give it in a balanced way brain-wise, because if you're talking to a person who's more left brain dominant, they don't want to hear a story. They just want the facts, and they want you to be clear and decisive, and so they can be done. Whereas a right brain person is more creative, and they love the story because the story is how they integrate it into their system and pull it in and hold it and know that they know it. So a leader has to be able to deal with all of that. Plus, they have to handle all that physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, maybe chaos in the people that are learning or are there to be mentored.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can see that. So can you give us maybe a high-level overview of how you would work with someone to bring these skills and abilities into their leadership, into their own definition of who they are as a leader?
Well, basically what they would want to know is, number one, when you're doing leadership training, who's your audience? What do they most want? What are they missing as a component? And when I look out at other programs, I see a lot of pieces that are missing. So they may be, even as a leader, you may be focusing on the mental part or the emotional part. But if the body isn't healthy, you know as well as I do, the first thing we do is we shut everything off to get our body back to health. So anybody that's experiencing a health crisis has to stop all that other stuff that's going on in the world to get back to health, because that's the most important. So typically when I start with somebody to lead them into a self-empowerment spot is I start with how to get that physical body to maximize its output for you. So you want to be strong, you want to be flexible, and you want to be in a healthy state so that you're generating an outward energy that you can actually keep up with what's going on. And as a leader, you have to walk that. You have to know that in your own body so that you can lead from that space first. Because that magnetic energy from that physical actually is your biggest attractor.
Yes. And if the leader does not take care of themselves and model that kind of self-care behavior so that everyone can perform at their peak, you can't expect the rest of the organization to be performing at their peak, can you?
No, for sure. So you have to start at that basic part where we all live in this physical body, and you start there to help them heal. And once they get their physical body attuned, then they can start to become aware and conscious of the emotions that may be backed up. Maybe there's anger, maybe there's fear, maybe there's self-worth issues. Maybe there's, you're doing too much protection. You're trying to protect yourself so much that you don't let enough in. And that comes from, our childhood, where we sometimes are hurt or bullied or, emotionally abused in a different way than it would be as an adult, but it still happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly I have observed in my own life that there are things that are reoccurring. I know my brother would say, yes, well, that lesson will be repeated until it is learned, even if they have to bring a 2x4 to your forehead. And sometimes I think, I really wish that I could learn sooner, that I see it happen. I'm obviously not in what's ahead of me, but I see it in retrospect, the same scenario created, and with essentially the same outcome. So if I were to come to you with that kind of situation, can you maybe give our listeners some pointers on how you might deal with me?
So then I would get you to the point where you can actually consciously know what that block is, and then I would use muscle testing or applied kinesiology or specialized kinesiology to find out from your body where you stored it. So I always tell my clients, Anne, it's kind of like when we were teenagers and we were in high school and we all had lockers, and I had the same looking lock as you, but you couldn't unlock it unless you had my combination. So everybody stores their information in different parts. You can store it in your structure. You can store it in your electrical body, like your acupuncture energy points. You can store it in your emotional part. You can store it in your spiritual part. You can store it in your motivation part. Wherever it is, the good thing about the work that I do is we have a hand mode that tells me exactly where you stored it, so then I can pull it out in the way you stored it. So that makes it very easy to get in and very easy to take it out. So the 2x4 doesn't ever have to hit you. Because that's not really a great outcome.
No, it's not. I completely agree.
It's getting to that pinpoint, to that spot where it is, finding the age that it began, who it was with, what your issue was, why you got stuck, and what you got out of it. And remember, as a child, most of the time we're only trying to do two things. We're trying to protect ourselves, or if we think we've done something wrong, we're trying to punish ourselves. So it's not really a big wow when you understand that, as a child, and a child is until 25, because the human brain, the full development isn't even close to done until almost 24 or 25, depending on the person. So from 18 to 25, when parents are coming in and telling me this, their kids driving them crazy because they think they're smarter than me, and I'm going, yay, I'm going to celebrate that, because that tells me that their brain is doing exactly what it should be, because between 18 and 25, your brain doubles all its neurons. And that's the moment in time when kids are so busy trying to decide if they go to college, do they not go to college, do they go to university, do they not, do I hang out with this group, or they're trying to find out who they are. And yet it's the time brain-wise that is the most important step as we move forward, because if they were to analyze every belief that they were fed as a young person and decide if they wanted to keep that in their storage banks of the brain, they would be able to reprogram their whole being in a very short time from 18 to 25. So, for example, your mom taught you don't touch the stove when it's hot when we were children, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't do that now as an adult, that wouldn't be a really good belief. So that would be something where you would be stuck if you didn't let that go. Or don't cross the road because it's dangerous. You and I both probably couldn't have gotten to our places of work today if we didn't cross the road. So in that space, you're supposed to look at beliefs and decide if those are really true, if those are really good for you, if they're really important for your safety and well-being as you move forward in your life. And a lot of people don't take any time to sit down quietly with themselves and go, well, I believe this. And I'll give you a really cute example. When I was raising my daughters had friends over, and they were, young children now go in groups. Now my girls are almost 40, and I have a son 42, but, they hung around in groups, and so I told them, you can't go to your room with boys. That was my mother's voice talking in my head. And my daughter said, why? Why would you even say that, Mom? All our stuff is in our room. The rest of the house is your stuff and not our stuff, like our music and our, photos and all of that stuff is in our room. And I had to reevaluate that belief. And it's like, okay, you can have guys in your room, and just know that I can walk in at any time. That's what I'm going to do, because the protective part of a mom is, okay, you don't go in a bedroom with a bunch of guys, right, from a generation ago. But when kids are hanging around in groups of friends now more than coupling up, it's very important that they have their own space to sit and chat and be with friends that they like. Now, you have to create a safe environment for that, but you understand the belief that I got stuck in was not mine. It was my mother's voice coming out. And that's sometimes where we as adults get stuck. We hear ourselves repeating something and we go, oh, wow, do I really believe that now? And that's the key, to really be able to decide for yourself, is this true? Is this for me right now? And is this at all working? Because when we repeat a pattern, it means that something isn't working on some level. I after studying all the metaphysical things, though, Anne, I have to tell you, I don't really believe that we're here for lessons. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that we're here to remember on a cellular level the simple power that we have as a spiritual being living in a physical body. And if you stick with that, it's like, what's the spiritual message here for me, and am I paying attention to it? And the message sometimes is, all it is for me to reevaluate whether this is really something I am truly wanting to do or just doing because someone's dragging me along.
Well, that's a very powerful thought, particularly when we think about developing our own leadership style, our leadership vision for ourselves, and whether we are applying the very best of ourselves to help others achieve their unique potential.
Exactly. And when you're staying in that, when you come from the energy that begins in our energy field, from the highest vibration outside of our aura, into our spiritual body, then into our mental body, then into our emotional body, and then hits our physical, it's like that remembering and connecting to that higher vibration allows you to see, is this really something I want to put any of my energy into? And a lot of us are people pleasers, so we say yes before we stop and think and make a conscious choice of whether that's really something I want to give my energy to. And a lot of people, when they're not strong enough, even when they say no, I always tell people, stop explaining your no. Don't explain it. Just leave it as a no. Don't go past that. Don't explain.
And for goodness sake, don't apologize.
Exactly. Make it your boundary and stick with your boundary. Don't let anyone try and negotiate around your boundaries. Because that's that soul part, giving you strength to say, this is not where I need to spend my energy, my time, maybe my finances at this time. And leaders should be able to show others how to do that with ease, make it easy, because if it's not easy, people don't want to follow through. If there's one thing I can tell you consistently in practice, if I give something that's too hard for people to follow, then they back off. They go into fear. And you don't want to create fear when you're trying to help them to discover at that deep level who they truly are.
Exactly. And I think that is a crucial point, and one that we can all, give some further thought to, the damaging power of fear.
Exactly. In my private practice, I have to tell you, it usually takes 12 weeks for me to get someone to permanently stay out of fight or flight. And that's very sad. Because people go into fight or flight as an automatic reflex way too much instead of stopping, taking a breath in, and deciding if this is what they really want right now at this moment. And I know in a job situation we can think that that's very difficult because you can't always say no or negotiate around it. But when you're in a job, you've made a decision to be in that job. So go in and know that you're there to do the very best you can for the hours that you're there, and give yourself permission when you're not at work to actually stop work. Most females will work 15 to 16 hours a day because we get up and we do our life, and then we go to work, and then we go home and do our life and help our children and do all of these things. But you don't stop to put an hour a day in just for you. And that's the most important piece you can do. Whether you do meditation, whether you dance, whether you exercise, whether you sing, whether you play cards with your friends, whether you read, it doesn't really matter what, but something that makes your heart sing on a daily basis. Because that's where your joy comes, and it emanates out from you at every other moment of your life.
Well, that is such a valuable piece of advice. So, Sue, what about how do you work with people? What if they're not within driving distance of your office? How can you help people on a much broader national or international basis?
Well, I have lots of international clients. We either do Skype or I do medical intuitive reads for them, and they can provide me with a problem, and I can do what's called a quantum healing chart on them. That, so if they're looking for something very specific, then I can find out all the blocks for them, and then I can tell them how to remove them. So we can do phone, we can do Skype, or we can do healing charts where they give me that information, and then move forward from there. Like I said, I started out not being able to do that. When I learned medical intuitive work, I learned how to be able to work with energy remotely. And so that really helps me when I'm working with clients who aren't here. And like I said, I've got clients all over the world. The hardest thing with that is time zone difference. It's like, what time are you calling me? But other than that, it's not a problem at all.
Well, that is so encouraging to know, because we will have listeners all over the world, and I want them to know that you are accessible that you can be there to help them reach their own unique potential so that they can bring to the world their personal best.
That's awesome. That's what everybody deserves in this lifetime.
So, Sue, what would you like people to know about yourself?
Well, that I can create and hold a safe space for them to activate and achieve their hidden potential by eliminating those fears and blocks that hold them back.
So stop there for a second. When you talk about holding a safe space, do you think everyone knows what that means?
Well, if they don't, I can explain it. It means I hold the energy for you to be in that stuck spot and really understand it so that you can remember that it's not a spot you choose and you don't want to be there anymore, and then encourage you and give you direction on how to move out of that space without dragging that information and that pain and that suffering and that confusion with you into a new space where you feel comfortable, relaxed, and know that you're choosing from a true spot of your own choice, not from old beliefs or old fears or old dictations by peers or friends that won't maybe like you as you move forward. And sometimes that's the hardest thing, is letting go of people that no longer are in the same energetic space that you are. And it's also sad, right, when we leave old people behind or old friends behind. But that's part of learning to grow, is that you can't be held back by anybody. So that safe space creates that energy around you so that you feel comfortable to move forward and not regret and not have remorse about leaving any person or thing behind.
That just makes me feel so good to know that. Now, Sue, we are getting close to the end of our time together, so we must make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you. Okay.
So they can connect with me by email at Sue Maes, and my last name is Maes, .coach@gmail.com, or they can check out my web, which is SueMaes.com.
Okay, and we'll just remind you that that's SueMaes.com. Yes. And there's lots of information on your website, and you have upcoming workshops and other activities that I think make you very accessible to the population at large. And whatever help it is that listeners need, you're there to give it. And that will set them up for success as they step into whatever leadership role it is they have in their vision for themselves.
Exactly.
So if you had one lesson or message to leave with our listeners today, Sue, what would that be?
Dream big, set big goals, take action, and live the life you want.
And I second that. Listeners, I know you join me in thanking Sue for being with us today and sharing her wisdom. Sue, thank you so very much.
You're more than welcome, Ann. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for listening to Encouraging Leadership. To learn more about our host, Ann Miner, and the Acacia Institute, please visit acaciainstitute.com. Join us next week at the same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, for more Encouraging Leadership. In the meantime, be courageous.